Amber Mitchell, 27, and I sat frozen at our family dinner table, my heart hammering against my ribs as my father's ultimatum hung in the air. "Apologize to your sister or leave this house and never come back," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. 20 pairs of eyes bore into me from around our expansive dining table. My sister Madison sat across from me, her expression a perfect mask of victimhood, though I caught the slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, almost a smirk. I opened my mouth to defend myself again, when Madison suddenly straightened in her chair. "Actually," she said, her voice eerily calm. I framed her. The crystal glasses on the table seemed to vibrate with the collective gasp. My father's face drained of color. "Before I dive into how this all happened, where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments. If this story of family betrayal and redemption resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Trust me, the journey from being the family scapegoat to finally being vindicated is one wild ride you won't want to miss." Growing up in our wealthy Boston suburb, our family dynamics were clear to everyone. Madison was the golden child, and I was the troublemaker. Our sprawling colonial home with its manicured lawn and white picket fence was the perfect backdrop for what everyone thought was the perfect family. On the surface, we had it all. Madison, 5 years my senior at 32, was everything my parents wanted in a daughter. She was class valedictorian, head cheerleader, and president of every club she joined. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes immaculate. She knew exactly what to say to our parents to make them beam with pride. "Madison is going places," was my father's favorite phrase throughout our childhood. Then there was me, creative, independent, and always questioning authority. I preferred art to math, novels to textbooks, and exploring the woods behind our house to attending country club events. My father, Richard, a prominent corporate attorney, couldn't understand why I wasn't more like Madison. He was strict with both of us, but, especially me, his disappointment was palpable whenever I failed to meet his expectations, which was often. My mother, Stephanie, wasn't much better. Though occasionally she'd squeeze my hand under the dinner table when Dad was particularly harsh, she never openly defended me. "Your father just wants what's best for you," she'd whisper after yet another lecture about my grades or my attitude. What no one seemed to notice was Madison's talent for manipulation. It started with small things when we were children. When I was 8, she broke our great-grandmother's vase while practicing her dance routine in the living room. When our parents discovered the shattered porcelain, Madison tearfully claimed she saw me playing ball in the house. I spent 2 weeks grounded, despite my protests. By the time I was 12, Madison had perfected her technique. Mom's sapphire earrings went missing, earrings she only wore on special occasions. 3 days of household tension followed, with accusatory glances thrown my way. Then Madison found them in my jewelry box. I hadn't even known where Mom kept those earrings, but no one believed me. The worst was right before my senior prom. I'd saved for months to buy a midnight blue dress that made me feel beautiful for once. The night before prom, I found it in tatters, supposedly damaged by our family dog. But our golden retriever had never destroyed anything before. Later, I found threads the exact color of my dress in Madison's sewing kit. When I confronted her, she looked at me with wide, innocent eyes and asked loudly enough for our mother to hear, "Are you really blaming me for your carelessness?" I learned to keep my head down and my possessions locked away. Our parents never questioned Madison's version of events. "Why would your sister lie?" became the refrain of my childhood. The pattern was always the same. Madison would do something, blame me, and I'd be punished or ostracized. By 18, I couldn't wait to escape. I applied to colleges as far away as possible, landing at University of California, Berkeley. The distance gave me room to breathe and discover who I was outside of Madison's shadow. I limited my visits home to holidays and brief summer stays. Phone calls became less frequent. I built a life for myself, friends who valued me, a career in graphic design that fulfilled my creative passions, and eventually, a small but comfortable apartment in San Francisco. For 5 years, I maintained this careful distance. I sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts, I called on Mother's Day and Father's Day, but I protected myself from getting pulled back into the toxic dynamics of my childhood. I thought I'd found the perfect balance until my grandmother Evelyn died, and everything I'd built came crashing down. Grandmother Evelyn's funeral brought me back to Boston for the first time in nearly 2 years. She had been my refuge during childhood storms, the only one who seemed to see through Madison's act. In her garden or kitchen, I found acceptance I never felt in my own home. Her death left a hole in my heart I wasn't prepared for. The funeral was a somber affair at the old family church, followed by a reception at my parents' house. I kept to myself as much as possible, exchanging pleasantries with relatives but avoiding Madison and her husband Derek, an investment banker with a perpetual smirk who had always treated me with thinly veiled contempt. 3 days after the funeral, we gathered in the wood-paneled office of Grandmother Evelyn's attorney, Mr. Harrington. The room smelled of leather and old books as we settled into uncomfortable chairs. Madison sat beside Derek, her hand possessively on his arm, while I chose a seat near Cousin Riley, the only family member who had ever shown me genuine kindness. Now that everyone's here, we can proceed with the reading of Evelyn Mitchell's last will and testament, Mr. Harrington announced, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The first part was standard personal items distributed to various family members, donations to her favorite charities. Then came the surprise. To my grandchildren, Mr. Harrington read, I leave the remainder of my estate, to be divided equally among them. The room went silent. Grandmother Evelyn had been wealthy, more wealthy than any of us had realized. Her investments had performed exceptionally well, and she owned several properties that had appreciated significantly in value. According to Mr. Harrington, each grandchild would receive approximately $5 million. I felt the blood drain from my face. Financial independence had never been part of my life plan. It'd been focused on simply building a career I enjoyed. But this would change everything. I could buy a home in the Bay Area. I could start my own design studio. I could travel. The possibilities made me dizzy. Madison's reaction was quite different. I watched her face contort briefly before she regained control. She had clearly expected to receive a larger portion than the rest of us, perhaps even the lion's share. The thought of me receiving an equal amount seemed to physically pain her. There must be some mistake, she said, her voice tight. Grandmother always said I was the one who would carry on her legacy. Mr. Harrington merely adjusted his glasses again. There is no mistake, Mrs. Pierce. Your grandmother was quite clear in her instructions. That evening, my parents hosted a family dinner. The tension was palpable as we gathered around the dining table. Madison barely touched her food, while Derek drank more wine than usual. My father attempted to maintain normal conversation, discussing politics and the stock market, while my mother fluttered about refilling glasses and offering seconds. Midway through dessert, I excused myself to use the restroom. As I passed the study on my way back, I heard Madison's voice, sharp and angry. It's not fair, she was saying to Derek. After everything I did to stay in her good graces, all those Sunday visits and holiday meals. And now Amber gets the same amount? She barely came to see grandmother. Well, figure something out, Derek replied, his voice low. There are ways to take care of the situation. I froze, my heart pounding. What did he mean by take care of the situation? I slipped past the door before they could discover me eavesdropping, but a sense of unease followed me back to the dining room. For the remainder of my stay, I kept my distance from Madison and Derek. Their hushed conversations stopped whenever I entered a room. Madison suddenly began suggesting sister bonding activities, shopping trips, lunches, spa days, all of which I politely declined. Her newfound interest in reconnecting made me deeply suspicious. After a lifetime of her sabotage, I knew better than to let my guard down. A week into my stay, Madison cornered me in the kitchen one morning. Let's have lunch today, she suggested, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Just the two of us? It's been so long since we really talked. Every instinct told me to refuse, but my mother was watching with such hopeful eyes that I found myself agreeing. Sure. Lunch sounds fine. 3 hours later, we sat at a trendy bistro in Back Bay, an uncomfortable silence between us as we studied our menus. Madison looked polished as always in her designer dress and perfectly applied makeup, while I felt underdressed in my jeans and sweater. So, Madison began after we ordered, "How's San Francisco?" Still doing that graphic design thing. It's not a thing. It's my career. I corrected her. And yes, it's going well. Madison nodded, taking a delicate sip of her sparkling water. Good for you. I always knew you'd find something creative to do. The conversation continued in this vein, seemingly pleasant, but with undercurrents of condescension. Madison asked about my apartment, my friends, my dating life, all while subtly reminding me of her superior life choices, her successful husband, her beautiful home in Beacon Hill, her connections in Boston society. When our salads arrived, she shifted tactics. So, what are you planning to do with grandmother's money? I carefully placed my fork down. I haven't decided yet. The estate hasn't even been settled. I'm thinking of starting a foundation in her name, Madison said, brushing an invisible crumb from her lap. Derek says it would be a good tax write-off, plus it would really honor her memory. That sounds nice, I replied noncommittally. You could contribute some of your portion, she suggested. Since you weren't around much during her final years. There it was, the guilt trip I'd been expecting. I'll consider all my options once everything's finalized, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Madison's smile tightened slightly. Of course. We all need to be thoughtful about such a significant amount. It would be a shame to squander it. As we finished our meal, Madison checked her watch. I need to stop by Mom and Dad's house to pick up some photo albums. Would you mind coming with me? Mom mentioned wanting to see you. Again, alarm bells rang in my head, but refusing would only make me seem paranoid. Sure, I can come for a little while. When we arrived at our parents' house, it was oddly quiet. Mom must be at her book club, Madison said, leading me inside. But since we're here, would you mind helping me look for grandmother's old photo albums? Dad mentioned they were in his study. I hesitated. Our father's study had always been nearly off-limits, growing up a sacred space where he worked and expected not to be disturbed. Shouldn't we wait for Dad to get them? Don't be silly, Madison said, already heading down the hallway. He told me it was fine. They should be in the cabinet behind his desk. Reluctantly, I followed her into the study. The room smelled of leather and my father's cologne, the walls lined with law books and family photographs. Madison immediately began opening cabinets, pulling out boxes of papers and old albums. Help me look through these, she instructed, placing a stack of albums on the desk. For 20 minutes, we sorted through photographs, Madison occasionally commenting on a family vacation or holiday gathering. Then her phone rang. It's Derek, she said, glancing at the screen. I need to take this. Keep looking, the album has a blue cover with gold trim. She stepped out of the study, closing the door behind her. I continued searching for another few minutes before realizing Madison had been gone for quite a while. I opened the study door and listened, but the house was silent. Madison. I called out, but received no answer. Uneasy, I returned to the study and noticed something odd. The bottom drawer of our father's desk was slightly ajar. I distinctly remembered it being closed when we entered. Curiosity warred with caution as I approached the desk. Should I look inside? What if Madison was testing me? After a moment's hesitation, I decided against opening the drawer. Instead, I neatly restacked the albums we'd been looking through and left the study. I found Madison in the kitchen, calmly drinking a glass of water. Oh, there you are, she said. Sorry about that. Derek needed my opinion on something for work. Did you find the album you were looking for? I asked. No, but it's fine. I'll look again another time. She placed her glass in the sink. Ready to go. As we left the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Madison seemed too relaxed, almost satisfied. I made a mental note to be even more cautious around her in the days to come. 3 days after our lunch outing, my parents invited the extended family for dinner, ostensibly to thank everyone for their support during Grandmother Evelyn's funeral, though I suspected it was also an attempt to ease the tension that had been building since the will reading. The dining room was filled with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, all making polite conversation as my mother's housekeeper, Maria, served her famous beef tenderloin. Madison and Derek arrived last, Madison making a grand entrance in a designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Halfway through the main course, my father tapped his water glass with his fork, commanding attention from the table. His face looked unusually grave, deep lines etched around his mouth. I have something serious to discuss, he announced, his voice tight. Earlier today, I discovered that your grandmother's diamond necklace is missing from my safe. A murmur ran through the gathering. Grandmother Evelyn's necklace was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. The central diamond alone was nearly 3 carats, surrounded by smaller diamonds in a platinum setting. Its value was more sentimental than monetary, though it was undoubtedly worth a significant sum. I last checked the safe after the funeral. My father continued. It was definitely there then. I've searched the house thoroughly, but it's gone. Before anyone could respond, Madison cleared her throat delicately. Dad, she said, her voice laced with reluctance. I think I may know something about this. All eyes turned to her. She lowered her gaze, appearing uncomfortable. The other day, when Amber and I were looking for photo albums in your study, she trailed off, glancing at me apologetically. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about, Madison? Instead of answering, Madison pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times. I didn't want to show this, but... She passed her phone to our father. His face hardened as he looked at whatever was on the screen. Without a word, he passed the phone around the table. When it reached me, I felt the blood drain from my face. It was a photo of me in his study, standing near his desk. The angle made it appear as though I was closing the drawer, the same drawer he'd noticed was ajar that day. I don't understand, I said, my voice barely audible. You took a picture of me. I came back to the study and saw you at Dad's desk. Madison explained, her expression a perfect mask of regret. I thought you were just looking for the albums, but now... This proves nothing, I protested, looking around at my family's faces, seeing doubt and suspicion reflected back at me. I was helping Madison look for photo albums, that's all. My father's voice cut through my defense. Then how do you explain this? From his pocket, he produced a small, velvet jewelry box. This was found in your guest room this morning. Maria discovered it while changing the linens. Maria, standing by the dining room entrance, nodded in confirmation, though she wouldn't meet my eyes. That's not possible, I gasped. I never took anything. Someone planted that there. Who would do such a thing? My mother asked, her voice trembling. My eyes shot to Madison, who was looking down at her plate, the perfect picture of distress. She would, I said firmly. Madison set me up. The table erupted in protest. How dare you accuse your sister? My Aunt Patricia exclaimed. Always blaming others. Uncle Robert muttered, shaking his head. My father silenced everyone with a raised hand. His face was flushed with anger, disappointment etched in every line. Amber, the evidence is clear. The necklace is missing. You were seen at my desk. The box was found in your room. Dad, please. I begged, tears springing to my eyes. I would never steal from you or grandmother. Then explain the box, he demanded. I can't. Someone put it there to frame me. I looked directly at Madison, who now had tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this? She whispered, her voice breaking. First you take grandmother's necklace, and now you try to blame me. Derek put his arm around her protectively. This is low, even for you, Amber. I looked around desperately, seeing judgment in every face. My mother was quietly crying, while my father's expression had hardened into stone. My cousins whispered among themselves, and my aunts and uncles regarded me with disgust. Panic rose in my chest. This couldn't be happening again, not as an adult, not with something this serious. Madison had framed me my entire life, but this was different. This was calculated, deliberate, and potentially criminal. If my family believed I had stolen the necklace, what would happen next? Would my father call the police? Would I be disinherited? I didn't take it. I repeated, my voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to fall. I don't know how that box got in my room, but I never opened your safe. I don't even know the combination. The safe was not broken into, my father replied coldly. It was opened with the combination. Which? I don't know, I insisted. But you could have found it, Madison suggested softly. Dad keeps it written down in his desk. Of course she would know that. She probably used that information herself to open the safe. As accusations continued to fly around the table, I felt the walls closing in. This was Madison's most elaborate setup yet, and it was working perfectly. Just like when we were children, everyone believed her without question. My father stood up, his napkin thrown onto the table with finality. His face had transformed from the successful, composed attorney to something I barely recognized, raw with anger and disappointment. "Enough," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "This ends now, Amber. Either you apologize to your sister and return the necklace, or you leave this house and never come back." The ultimatum hung in the air like a physical thing. 27 years of history compressed into a single moment of decision. Apologize for something I didn't do again or be cut off from my family forever. Madison dabbed at her eyes with a linen napkin, the perfect image of the wronged sister. "Amber, please," she whispered. "Just tell everyone where the necklace is. We can work through this as a family." I looked at her performance because that's what it was, and something inside me finally broke, not in defeat, but in liberation. All my life I had retreated, accepted blame, tried to keep the peace, and where had it gotten me? Estranged from my family anyway, always walking on eggshells, forever the black sheep. "No," I said, the word ringing clear in the silent dining room. "I won't apologize for something I didn't do. Not this time." My father's face darkened further. "Then you've made your choice." "I have." I agreed, standing up to face him directly. "But before I go, I want everyone here to know the truth." I turned to face Madison. "This isn't the first time you've framed me, is it, Madison? You've been doing it our whole lives." Madison's eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice catching theatrically. "Don't you?" I challenged. "The vase when I was 8? Mom's sapphire earrings? My prom dress, ancient history." Madison dismissed with a wave. "And none of it compares to stealing a family heirloom." "Which I didn't do," I exclaimed, looking around the table at my family members. Some wouldn't meet my eyes, while others stared back with judgment. "Can't any of you see what's happening here? Madison has always been jealous of me, and now she's jealous that grandmother left me an equal share of her estate." "That's ridiculous," Derek interjected. "Madison doesn't need your money." "This isn't about need," I shot back. "It's about what she thinks she deserves." I turned back to my father. "Dad, you've always believed her over me. Every single time, without question. But think about it, what motivation would I have to steal grandmother's necklace now? I'm about to receive an inheritance that would make the necklace's value seem insignificant." A flicker of doubt crossed my father's face, but Madison quickly jumped in. "She's trying to manipulate you, Dad. She's always been good at that." I laughed bitterly. "That's rich, coming from you." My mother spoke up for the first time, her voice small. "Amber, please. Just tell us where the necklace is." I felt tears of frustration building. "I don't have it." "I never did." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. Aunt Patricia murmured something about always troublesome, while Uncle Robert shook his head disapprovingly. My teenage cousins looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. Then I remembered something critical. "Dad, don't you have security cameras? You installed them last year after the break-in next door." My father hesitated. "Yes, but—" "Then check the footage," I insisted. "It will show who went into your study and when." A strange expression crossed Madison's face, alarm, quickly masked by confidence. "The cameras don't cover the interior of the house," she said quickly. "Just the exterior doors and windows. That's not true." My cousin Riley interjected unexpectedly. "Uncle Richard showed me the system when I was house-sitting last summer. There's definitely a camera in the hallway outside the study." All eyes turned to my father, who looked suddenly uncomfortable. "The system has been unreliable lately." "Convenient," I muttered. "Dad, please, check the cameras. If I'm on video taking anything from your safe, I'll apologize to everyone and leave forever, just like you want. But if I'm not, will you at least consider that I might be telling the truth?" My father looked torn, caught between his golden daughter and his troublemaker child. For a moment, I thought he might actually listen to reason. Then Madison stood up dramatically. "This is absurd! Are we really going to let Amber distract us with camera footage that probably doesn't even exist? The evidence is clear she was in the study. The jewelry box was in her room. As the arguments erupted again around the table, I realized nothing had changed. Nothing would ever change as long as Madison held this power over our family. It was time to break free, once and for all. As the family dinner descended into chaos, I slipped away from the table, needing a moment alone to process what had just happened. I found myself in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the marble counter and taking deep breaths to steady myself. "Are you okay?" a gentle voice asked from behind me. I turned to find my cousin Riley standing in the doorway, concern written across her face. At 25, she was closer to my age than any other cousin, though we hadn't been particularly close growing up, not really, I admitted. "But thanks for speaking up in there." Riley glanced over her shoulder to ensure we were alone. "Look, I've never said anything before, but I've always thought Madison was off. The way she treats you isn't normal." I stared at her in surprise. "You noticed?" It was hard not to, once I started paying attention. Riley leaned against the counter beside me. "When we were kids, I believed all the stories about you being the troublemaker. But as I got older, I saw how Madison would act one way around the adults and completely differently when they weren't looking." Tears pricked at my eyes. After all these years, someone in my family had actually seen through Madison's facade. "Thank you for telling me that," I whispered. Riley squeezed my arm. "I believe you about the necklace. And I think we should check that security footage. Madison's probably already deleted it," I said glumly. "Maybe," Riley conceded. "But we won't know unless we try. Uncle Richard's office is empty right now, everyone's still arguing in the dining room." I hesitated. "If we get caught, then we're in trouble," Riley shrugged. "But you're already in trouble, so what do you have to lose?" She had a point. With renewed determination, I followed Riley through the house to my father's study. The door was unlocked, and we slipped inside quietly, closing it behind us. Riley went straight to my father's computer. "The security system feeds directly into this desktop," she explained, waking the screen. "The password is Stephanie1990, Aunt Stephanie's name and the year they got married." Not very creative. "How do you know his password?" I asked, impressed. "Like I said, I house sat last summer," Riley replied, typing quickly. "Uncle Richard wrote it down for me in case I needed to check the cameras." The security program opened, showing multiple camera feeds around the house. Riley navigated to the footage from 3 days ago, the day Madison and I had searched for albums in the study. "There." I pointed at the screen as the video showed Madison and me entering the study together. We fast-forwarded through the footage of us searching through albums, then watched as Madison left the room, closing the door behind her. "Now we just need to see if she came back," Riley murmured, continuing to advance the footage. Sure enough, about 10 minutes after leaving, Madison reappeared in the hallway. She glanced around furtively before entering the study again. The angle didn't show inside the room, but she emerged less than 2 minutes later. "That must be when she took the picture of you at the desk," Riley surmised. We continued watching the footage, fast-forwarding through the rest of the day. There was no footage of me returning to the study alone. "The problem is," I said, deflating slightly, "this doesn't prove I didn't take the necklace. It just shows Madison came back briefly." Riley bit her lip thoughtfully. "What about her phone? She might have evidence on there, text messages to Derek about framing you, or something." "We can't just take her phone," I protested. "No, but..." Riley glanced at the dining room security feed, which showed the continuing argument. "Her purse is hanging on her chair. She always puts her phone in the side pocket." It was a desperate move, but I was out of options. "Let's go." We hurried back to the dining room, pausing outside to formulate a plan. "I'll create a distraction," Riley whispered. "You check her purse." Riley entered the dining room first, deliberately knocking over a crystal vase on the sideboard. Water and flowers cascaded onto the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, kneeling to clean up the mess. In the chaos, I slipped to Madison's chair and quickly felt in her purse's side pocket. My fingers closed around her phone, thankfully unlocked, probably because she'd been checking it during dinner. Heart pounding, I navigated to her messages with Derek. There it was, a conversation from 3 days ago. "Madison, it's done. The necklace is in the safe deposit box." Derek, "What about the security cameras?" Madison, I'll delete the footage tonight when everyone's asleep. Dad never checks it anyway. Derek. And the box? Madison. Already planted in her room. Maria won't say anything she owes me for helping with her son's green card. Derek. Perfect. Once she's out of the will, we'll need to move quickly on the foundation idea to minimize taxes. My hands shaking, I quickly took screenshots of the messages and sent them to my own phone. Just as I was slipping Madison's phone back into her purse, I felt a presence behind me. What are you doing? Madison's voice was ice cold. I whirled around to face her, clutching my own phone tightly. Getting proof, I replied, holding her gaze steadily. Madison's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. You went through my phone? How dare you? No more dare than framing me for theft, I shot back. Riley appeared at my side, a silent show of support. Madison looked between us, calculation visible in her eyes. Whatever you think you found proves nothing, she said quietly. Who do you think they'll believe, me or you? Let's find out, I replied, a newfound confidence in my voice. It was time to confront my family with the truth, once and for all. I returned to the dining table with a strange sense of calm. For years I had been powerless against Madison's manipulations, but now I held concrete evidence in my hand. Riley took her seat beside me, offering a reassuring nod. My father was in the middle of explaining to everyone why he thought I should be excluded from the will reading when I interrupted him. Before you continue, Dad, I think everyone should see this, I said, placing my phone on the table. The screenshots from Madison's conversation with Derek were clearly visible on the screen. What is this? My father asked, picking up the phone. Evidence, I replied simply. Madison and Derek have been planning this from the beginning. They stole grandmother's necklace, hid it in a safe deposit box, and framed me so I would be cut off from the inheritance. My father's eyes widened as he read the messages. Madison lunged for the phone, but Riley quickly intercepted, taking it from my father's hands and passing it to my mother. These are obviously fake, Madison declared, her voice higher than usual. Amber probably created them herself. She's always been tech-savvy. They're not fake, I countered. I took these screenshots directly from your phone 5 minutes ago. Everyone here saw me at your chair. You went through my phone. Madison gasped, playing the victim card perfectly. That's a complete invasion of privacy. Is that really your primary concern right now? I asked. Not the fact that you framed me for theft and tried to get me disinherited. The phone made its way around the table, family members reading the incriminating messages with varying degrees of shock. My father looked shell-shocked, while my mother's hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the device. These could be about anything, Derek interjected smoothly. They're completely out of context. The necklace we're referring to could be one I was getting Madison as a surprise. Then where is grandmother's necklace? I challenged. You tell us, he shot back. You're the one who took it. I turned to my father, who had remained uncharacteristically silent. Dad, you know Madison has always been jealous of any attention or affection I received. She's been framing me since we were children. The difference is that, this time, she left evidence. My father looked between Madison and me, uncertainty clouding his features for perhaps the first time in his life. Madison, he asked, his voice unsteady. Madison's face crumpled into practiced tears. Daddy, you can't possibly believe these fake messages. This is just another one of Amber's desperate attempts to turn you against me. The messages mention a safe deposit box. I persisted. Check Madison and Derek's accounts. They probably opened a new box recently. This is absurd, Derek declared, standing up abruptly. We don't have to sit here and be accused by a known troublemaker. Known troublemaker, Riley interjected. You mean the person Madison has systematically framed for years? We checked the security footage, Uncle Richard. Madison went back into your study after leaving Amber alone. She had plenty of opportunity to take the necklace. The footage must have been tampered with, Madison insisted desperately. My Aunt Patricia, who had always favored Madison, surprisingly spoke up. Why would Madison need to frame Amber? She doesn't need the money. It's not about need, I explained. It's about what Madison thinks she deserves. She's always had to be the favorite, the perfect one. She couldn't stand that grandmother left me an equal share. That's ridiculous, Madison exclaimed. "I have everything I could ever want. Why would I care about your portion?" "Because it's not about the money," I said quietly. "It's about winning. It always has been." The dining room fell silent as everyone contemplated this. Then my mother, who had been examining the phone closely, looked up with tears in her eyes. "These messages mention Maria helping with the jewelry box," she said, her voice barely audible. "Maria." All eyes turned to the housekeeper, who had been quietly clearing dishes in the corner. She froze, her face a mask of guilt. "Mrs. Pierce asked me to put the empty box in Miss Amber's room," she admitted reluctantly. "She said it was for a surprise." Madison's face contorted with rage. "You stupid woman, you weren't supposed to say anything." The admission hung in the air like a thunderclap. Derek placed a restraining hand on Madison's arm, but she shook it off violently. "Don't touch me," she snapped at him. "This is your fault too. We need to move quickly," you said. "Don't leave any evidence," you said. "Well, look where that got us." Derek's face paled as Madison continued her tirade, incriminating them both further with every word. The perfect facade she had maintained for decades was crumbling before our eyes. "Madison," my father said, his voice heavy with shock and disappointment. "What have you done?" For a moment, Madison seemed to realize the depth of her mistake. She glanced around the table at the horrified faces of our family, then at Derek, who had physically distanced himself from her. "Fine," she finally said, her voice cold and clear. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I took the necklace." "And yes, I framed Amber. Just like I've been framing her our entire lives." Gasps echoed around the table. My mother let out a small sob. "But you don't understand," Madison continued, a strange smile playing on her lips. "She always got the attention. Poor artistic Amber, so sensitive, so special. Grandmother loved her more, even though I was the one who visited every week. I was the one who helped with her medications and listened to her stories." "That's not true," I whispered, stunned by the depth of her delusion. "Grandmother loved us both." "No." Madison slammed her hand on the table, making everyone jump. "She always preferred you. And then, to find out she left you the same amount as me? After everything I did? It wasn't fair. So you decided to take matters into your own hands," my father said, his lawyer's mind clearly piecing everything together. "The necklace was just leverage," Derek admitted, apparently deciding to save himself. "We thought if Amber was caught stealing, you'd cut her out of the will. The plan was to return the necklace later, claiming Madison found it somewhere." Madison whirled on him. "Shut up! Don't you dare throw me under the bus! Where is the necklace now?" my father demanded. Derek sighed heavily. "In a safe deposit box at First National, like the messages said. Box 415. Madison has the key." Madison's face transformed into something I barely recognized, rage and betrayal, warring with the realization that her perfect life was unraveling. "You promised to stand by me," she hissed at Derek. "You promised we were in this together." Derek stood up, straightening his tie. "That was before you got caught, Madison. I'm not going down for this." He looked at my father. "Richard, I had no idea how far Madison would take this. I thought it was just a harmless prank." "Liar!" Madison screamed, lunging at him. Uncle Robert quickly stepped between them, restraining Madison as she continued to hurl accusations. "You came up with the safe deposit box idea. You helped me delete the security footage." As Madison continued her meltdown, the full truth of my childhood came into sharp focus for everyone present. The perfect daughter, the golden child, had been a fraud all along. And for the first time in my life, my family was seeing it too. The aftermath of Madison's confession was unlike anything I could have imagined. The perfect facade she had maintained for decades had shattered completely, revealing the manipulation and jealousy beneath. As she continued her tirade, more truth spilled out. A lifetime of deceptions laid bare in front of our stunned family. "You want to know what else I did?" Madison challenged, her voice taking on a manic quality. "The vase, when we were kids, I broke it, practicing my ballet routine. The missing earrings, I took them to wear to Brittany Wilson's party. Amber's prom dress, I cut it up because she looked better in it than I did in mine." With each confession, my parents' faces grew more ashen. These were small incidents compared to the necklace theft, but they represented a pattern of behavior that had shaped our family dynamics for decades. And you know what the funny part is? Madison continued, laughing bitterly. It was so easy. All I had to do was cry and look innocent, and you both immediately blamed Amber. Every single time. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down her face. Why, Madison? Why would you do this to your sister? Madison's expression hardened. Because she was special, and I was just expected to be perfect. Do you know how exhausting that is? Being valedictorian, cheerleading captain, getting into Harvard, none of it was ever enough. But Amber could draw some stupid picture and you'd put it on the fridge like shed cured cancer. The raw jealousy in her voice shocked me. All these years, I had thought Madison was the favored child, while she had apparently felt the exact opposite. That's not true, my father said, finding his voice at last. We were proud of both of you. Please, Madison scoffed. You were proud of my achievements, not me. There's a difference. Derek, who had been inching toward the door, cleared his throat. I think I should go. Madison whirled on him, her expression venomous. Running away? Just like you did when I told you I was pregnant last year and you made me get an abortion because it wasn't the right time. Gasps echoed around the table, Derek's face drained of color. Madison, stop. You're making things worse. Worse. She laughed hysterically. How could things possibly get worse? My perfect life is already over, thanks to you and your cowardice. Derek straightened his shoulders. I'm not the one who's been framing my sister since childhood. I'm not the one who stole a family heirloom. He looked around the table. I'm sorry, everyone. I truly had no idea how disturbed Madison was until recently. I'll be filing for divorce as soon as possible. With that bombshell, he walked out, leaving Madison staring after him in shock. For a moment, the room was silent, except for my mother's quiet sobbing. Then Madison seemed to deflate, collapsing back into her chair. Hess, leaving me, she whispered, as if just realizing it. My husband is leaving me. Despite everything, I felt a surprising twinge of pity. Madison had built her entire identity around being perfect daughter, perfect wife, perfect sister, in the eyes of everyone but me. Now that carefully constructed image was crumbling before her eyes. My father stood up, his lawyer persona taking over. Madison, you need to return the necklace immediately. Tomorrow morning, well, go to the bank together. And then what? She asked dully. He hesitated. Then, well, decide as a family what happens next. Aunt Patricia, who had always doted on Madison, looked at her with new eyes. All these years, we thought. She trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Uncle Robert shook his head in disbelief. Richard, Stephanie, I don't know what to say. We had no idea. My mother finally looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. Amber, she began, then broke down completely. I'm so sorry. We failed you. I failed you. The apology I had waited for my entire life landed like a physical weight on my chest. It should have felt vindicating, but instead, it just felt sad. So many years lost to Madison's jealousy and my parents' blindness. Riley squeezed my hand under the table. You okay? She whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if it was true. The revelation of Madison's manipulations had brought validation, but also opened new wounds. What did it mean for my family going forward? Could relationships damaged by decades of deception ever truly heal? Madison stood up suddenly. I need some air, she muttered, heading for the door. No one tried to stop her. After she left, the remaining family members sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, my cousin Simon spoke up. Should someone go after her, let her go, my father said tiredly. She needs time to think about what she's done. I looked around the table at my extended family, the aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had always seen me as the troublemaker. Their expressions ranged from shock to embarrassment to pity. The family dynamics had shifted irrevocably in a single evening. I think I need some air too, I said quietly, standing up. Outside on the porch, the cool night air cleared my head slightly. Stars twinkled overhead, indifferent to the family drama that had just unfolded. I took deep breaths, trying to process everything that had happened. The door opened behind me, and my father stepped out. For a long moment, he stood beside me in silence, both of us looking out at the carefully manicured lawn. "I don't know what to say," he finally admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Except that I'm sorry, Amber. More sorry than you can possibly imagine." I turned to look at him, this man who had been both my hero and my harshest judge throughout my life. In the porch light, I could see every line on his face, the gray in his hair, the weight of realization in his eyes. "I believed her," he continued. "Every time, without question. I never gave you the benefit of the doubt. What kind of father does that? The kind who thought he knew his daughters." I replied softly, "You saw what Madison wanted you to see." He shook his head. "That's no excuse. I should have known better. I should have protected you." The apology was 27 years late, but hearing it unlocked something inside me. Tears I had been holding back began to fall freely. "I just wanted you to believe me," I whispered. "Just once." My father did something then that he hadn't done since I was a small child. He pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly as I sobbed against his shoulder. His own body shook with silent tears. "I believe you now," he said. "And I promise, things will be different going forward." Whether that promise could be kept remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, my family could heal. 1 month after the explosive family dinner, I sat across from my father at a small cafe in downtown Boston. Steam rose from our coffee cups as an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. It was our first one-on-one conversation since the confrontation, and neither of us seemed to know where to begin. "How's San Francisco?" he finally asked, his fingers tapping nervously against his cup. "It's fine," I replied. "Busy with work. I have a new client, a tech startup that needs complete branding." He nodded, genuine interest flickering in his eyes. "That sounds impressive. You've really built something for yourself out there." "I had to," I said simply. The words weren't meant to hurt him, but I saw him flinch nonetheless. "Amber?" he began, then paused to collect his thoughts. "I've been seeing a therapist, Dr. Winters. She's helping me understand a lot of things." This surprised me. My father had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to listen to your problems. The fact that he was willingly seeking help spoke volumes about how deeply Madison's betrayal had affected him. "That's good," I said cautiously. "One thing she's helping me recognize is how I enabled Madison's behavior." He stared down at his coffee. "I rewarded her perfectionism without questioning it. I placed impossible expectations on both of you, but in different ways." He looked up at me, his eyes haunted. "And I failed to protect you." Repeatedly. The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tighten. "Yes," I agreed softly. "You did." He nodded, accepting my truth without defense. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Amber. I don't deserve it yet. I just want you to know that I see it now, all of it, and am trying to do better." We sipped our coffee in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question that had been weighing on me. "How is Madison?" My father sighed heavily. "Shay's struggling. Derek filed for divorce last week. Shay's staying with your mother and me for now. She's also in therapy, though I'm not sure how committed she is to the process." "And the necklace?" "Returned to the safe. Where it belongs." He hesitated. "Madison won't face criminal charges. We decided to handle it within the family. But there will be consequences regarding grandmother's estate." I nodded, relieved. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my sister in jail. "Has she said anything about why she did it?" "Her therapist thinks she's been competing with you her entire life for attention, for approval, for love. Apparently, she convinced herself that you were the favorite, especially with grandmother Evelyn." He shook his head in bewilderment. "I never saw it," I thought. "You thought I was the problem. I finished for him." "Yes," he admitted. "And I was wrong, so terribly wrong." We fell silent again, both contemplating the years of misunderstanding and hurt. "Mom called me yesterday," I said. "She wants me to come for dinner next week." My father looked hopeful. "Will you come?" I hesitated. "I'm not sure yet. It's a lot to process." "I understand. But she misses you, Amber." We both do. He reached across the table tentatively, not quite touching my hand. Whatever you decide, know that there will always be a place for you. On your terms. Later that afternoon, I met Riley at Boston Common. We walked along the paths where fallen leaves crunched beneath our feet, the autumn air crisp and clear. "So, how was coffee with Uncle Richard?" she asked. "Surprisingly okay," I admitted. "He's actually going to therapy," Riley whistled. "Never thought it'd see the day. Aunt Stephanie mentioned he's been different since everything happened. More reflective." "What about the rest of the family?" I asked. "Have people been talking about it? Are you kidding?" "It's all anyone can talk about," Riley said with a wry smile. The perfect Madison Pierce, caught framing her sister and stealing a family heirloom. It's like something out of a soap opera. I winced. I didn't want it to be a scandal. "I know you didn't," Riley assured me. "But honestly, it needed to come out. The family dynamics were so toxic for so long, and most people didn't even realize it." We paused by the duck pond, watching a mother duck lead her ducklings across the water. "I've been thinking about the inheritance," I said. "About what to do with it, and I'm going to accept it," I decided. "But am setting up boundaries. I won't let the money tie me to family obligations I'm not ready for." Riley nodded approvingly. "Smart move. Speaking of family, are you coming to Thanksgiving at Aunt Patricia's?" The thought of facing the entire extended family made my stomach knot. "I'm not sure yet." "If you do," Riley said, "I've got your back. So does Simon, by the way. He feels terrible about never seeing through Madison's act." The knowledge that I now had allies within the family was still strange but comforting. For so long, I had felt completely alone. That evening, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up some childhood belongings I wanted to take back to San Francisco. I had timed my visit deliberately, knowing Madison would be at her therapy appointment. As I sorted through old sketchbooks in my childhood bedroom, the door creaked open. I looked up to see my mother standing uncertainly in the doorway. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I nodded, and she perched on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I found this," she said, holding out a small, tissue-wrapped package. "It was in Madison's things. I thought you should have it." Curious, I unwrapped the tissue paper to find a delicate silver charm bracelet. I recognized it immediately. Grandmother Evelyn had given it to me for my 16th birthday. It had disappeared a week later, and I had always assumed I had carelessly lost it. "Madison took it," my mother explained, tears gathering in her eyes. "There were other things too. Little keepsakes of yours that went missing over the years." I held the bracelet in my palm, feeling the weight of it, both physical and emotional. Why did she keep them? "I don't know," my mother admitted. "Trophies, maybe? Or perhaps, in some twisted way, it was her attempt to hold onto pieces of you when you started pulling away." I slipped the bracelet onto my wrist, where it belonged. "Thank you for returning it." My mother watched me, her expression a mixture of sorrow and hope. "Amber, I know an apology isn't enough. I failed you as a mother. I saw what was happening, at least some of it, and I did nothing." "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. "Why did you never stand up for me?" She looked down at her hands. "I was a coward," she said simply. It was easier to believe Madison's lies than to confront the possibility that my perfect daughter was deeply troubled, and your father was so convinced of your guilt each time. I didn't have the strength to challenge him. Her honesty was both painful and refreshing. "I needed you," I said, my voice breaking. "So many times I needed just one person to believe in me." "I know," she whispered. "And I will regret that for the rest of my life." She met my gaze directly. "But I'm here now, if you'll let me be. Not to make excuses, but to try to rebuild something new, something better." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of misunderstanding between us. Finally, I reached out and took her hand. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Over the following weeks, I extended my stay in Boston, using my laptop to work remotely while navigating the complex process of family reconciliation. I had dinner with my parents twice more, each time slightly less awkward than the last. I reconnected with cousins who reached out, making tentative plans for coffee or lunch. Madison and I maintained our distance. She sent a formal apology letter, clearly written at her therapist's suggestion, but made no attempt to see me in person. I was relieved. Some wounds were still too fresh, some betrayals too profound. Perhaps someday we might find a way forward, but for now, space was what we both needed. As the weeks passed, I found myself healing in unexpected ways. The validation of finally being believed after a lifetime of blame lifted a weight I hadn't fully recognized I was carrying. For the first time, I could look back at my childhood without questioning my own memories and perceptions. I decided to use part of my inheritance to establish a graphic design scholarship for young artists, honoring Grandmother Evelyn's belief in my creative talents. The rest I invested, creating financial security while maintaining my independence from family wealth. The day before I was scheduled to return to San Francisco, my father invited me to dinner at the same restaurant where he had proposed to my mother 35 years earlier. It was a symbolic choice, representing both family history and new beginnings. "I have something for you," he said, sliding a small box across the table after we ordered. Inside was a key. "What's this?" I asked. "To the lake house," he explained. "Grandmother Evelyn's summer cottage. I know how much you loved it there." I stared at the key in surprise. The lake house had been my sanctuary during difficult childhood summers, a place where I could sketch and read and simply be myself. "The property transfers are being finalized," my father continued. "It's yours now, if you want it. A place in the family that's just yours, no strings attached." Tears pricked at my eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just know that I'm proud of you, Amber. Not for what you've achieved, though that's impressive, but for who you are, for your strength and integrity." I should have seen it sooner. As we finished our meal, I realized something important. The family I had now wasn't the same one I had grown up with. The dynamics had shifted irrevocably. Old patterns had been broken, painful truths revealed. What remained was imperfect and wounded, but also more authentic than anything we had shared before. Standing up for myself had changed everything. The path forward wouldn't be easy, real healing never is. There would be setbacks and difficult conversations, and probably more tears. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged in my own family story. Not as the black sheep, not as the scapegoat, but as Amber Mitchell, finally seen and heard for exactly who I am. I left Boston the next day with the lake house key in my pocket and a newfound sense of peace in my heart. The truth had finally set me free. What would you do if you were in my position? Would you forgive family members who failed to believe you for so many years? Have you ever had to stand up to a manipulative family member? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe for more true family stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing in your truth can change everything. Thank you for listening to my story today. Remember, sometimes the hardest battles we fight are within our own families, but finding your voice is always worth it.